Good morning all. What a wonderful turnout. I'm absolutely thrilled to see so many of you here. Those of us that put this session together thought that it was a really great opportunity to share some information, to share the challenges and to share some solutions. We're hoping to have a fun day as well. We're hoping to have a bit of energy, a bit of excitement.
A few things about today. I think, we are here because there is this really unusual opportunity that's emerged because we have, the SPA in place, we have Queensland planning provisions, and we have most councils throughout the state at various stages of doing their planning schemes. And I think it's evident by the number of people and the range of people and where you've all come from today about, this seems to be very timely. The other thing that's going on though is that there's all these other exciting things that are happening, which many of the speakers are talking about today, this is the opportunity to capture them in your planning schemes. So really I think what today is all about is just finding ways to actually use the opportunity that we all have as a profession to get the best out of it for the communities that we work on behalf of.
And the last diagram there is quite illustrative of the waste of land. If we did business as usual, which is box E, which is for 50,000 people at about 700 square metres a block, that's how much land we'd need. And the dark grey is Canberra, urban Canberra now. So you can see how much more of urban Canberra we need to accommodate people at business as usual. The extreme is box A, which is 50,000 people at less than 100 square metres a block, and then you ramp it up. That diagram, and I think again this is really important for you in how you engage with your communities, is we found our failing is we're not able to illustrate and communicate effectively with the community what we mean about some of these concepts. So using a diagram like that becomes really effective in describing what density means. Because then they can see, Christ, if that's what box E is, and I don't want urban sprawl, but I'm saying I don't like box A either because that's going to mean 6 10-storey buildings, where does that sit for me? And of course we've got diagrams of different building forms that illustrate what the different densities mean. Here's another diagram to help illustrate to people where density will actually occur as opposed to what the physical form will be. We're saying our density is going to be along our transport corridors, our group and our town centres. Here's an illustration incrementally over time of where development will occur in a particular corridor.
But anyway, let me just talk about this notion of strategic planning through the eyes of Gary White. Strategic planning should tell the story about a particular place, where it is, where it's come from, what it wants to be and how it will get there. The story can be told as a broad overview over a local government area. You can break that broad overview into a series of statements about districts or even finer grained commentary about smaller areas such as your town centres, which you feel for a variety of reasons require special treatment. But what it's important to do is to tell that story, because that story is that outcome which planning is seeking to do as part of the process. And if anyone thinks I'm being patronising, accept it, maybe I am being patronising to some extent in terms of what I'm talking to you about today. This notion of line of sight that Neil touched on as well is extremely relevant to the discussion, so that one level informs the next, but always telling the story about what you're trying to achieve in your planning, because after all, that's why you've started the process. An important thread about this planning model that I'm talking about would seem to me to enable that which adds value to that stated or intended outcome. Now, there's some logic that goes with that sort of a process. If you've stated an outcome and you have an opportunity to enable in that which will build and populate in that issue and add value, then you should be looking for that as part of the process. Culture is an element which comes into this overview on strategic planning, this simplistic proposition that I put to you. Because it would seem to me that a planning approach which focuses on outcome by its very nature should be generating an attitude of making something happen or making something eventuate. So this notion of blocking should be put to one side if you're thinking that way.
The intent there is to say, go through this process. Go through the process of defining what the intent is for your local government area. How do you take the regional strategies and the state plan strategies and the SPRP regulations and bring them into your local government area? How do you resolve that? And if on occasion there is disagreement at the regional plan level and the latest research and the latest expectations that are being expressed by your community, sit around a bloody table, talk about it and resolve it. You know, don't go, oh, the state got it wrong again. You know, do the work, do the communication. That's the purpose of these IPA planning schemes. That's the purpose of the strategic framework. If the state has got it wrong, or if the technology has changed, or if information is new, bring it into your new document, resolve it, talk about it and sort it out now. That's a brilliant opportunity that this document provides you with. One of the things that we haven't been doing well within the strategic frameworks is realising that there is a locational dimension to your strategic framework. There's a whole of local government area, there's a district. You can say within the strategic framework that you're going to do district planning. You can resolve many of your strategic planning, your structure planning, your master planning issues, as well as local area plans, or local plans, my apology. So that locational function can also be addressed in your strategic framework. So look at your strategic framework as a document that takes you into the future, and then when you get into your planning codes, your zones, your overlays, that's just your bolts to make it work today when the development application comes from consultancy into local government, or mum and dad does a subdivision or whatever. You have that reference point that will take you into the future. Conclusions, you can all read them. I can read my conclusions? Okay, strategic frameworks are fundamental to planning. Get it right, your whole plan works extremely well. The effort invested into your strategic plan will pay you many times over for your local community, for your development community, for everyone. And the relationship between the various levels of government. Strategic frameworks must be contextualised. Don't take the QPP and copy it and stick it in. Make it relevant to your local government area, to your place. Strategic frameworks are about an outcome. Strategic frameworks are not about processing development applications. That is achieved in your codes. And therefore, development assessment is a consequence of those outcomes in making places. Everything, every development that we present to local governments, that local governments process, should be about making places, and making places that we all want to live in.
The last thing I'd like to say is we need to get the ideas about our planning across the line. A lot of what we talk about, people cannot decipher. They do not know what we are talking about, and we need to use some new tools to be able to get the ideas of our plans across to people. Virtual Brisbane is a model that we've set up. We have the inner 5K covered, and we are using that as an evolutionary tool to show people of Brisbane what this means for them. My take-home points: partnerships, building ownership, and building from the top down and from the bottom up.
Can the panel name one strategic plan that represents a good example that the audience should read and learn from? Just an easy one to start with. You know?
Can I name two?
Yeah.
An international one, Portland. It's always difficult to go past Portland, Oregon. But nationally, and there's good reason for saying this, Adelaide. Go onto the COAG Reform Council's website. The interim report, or the milestone reports for city strategic planning, which I referenced in my talk, was recently completed, although I think Tasmania and New South Wales are yet to be done. And they've ranked the performance of cities against the 9 criteria, and at the moment they're saying the Adelaide strategic plan is probably the best. So there's a benchmark. Thanks, Neil. Anyone else?
I'd agree with the example of Portland. I think it's more of a regional plan, but Portland is a great example of telling you the story for the future at a metropolitan scale. In our own backyard, I see Melba sitting in the front row from Redlands. I think the current, or the old Redlands strategic plan is a very good example. It tells the story very well. It contextualises islands, it contextualises mainland, it tells you the story. And I also think if you want to have a look at the Ipswich Community Plan, that's a very good strategic framework when you have a look at that beside the Ipswich Town Plan. We cribbed a bit when we were in Ipswich because we did do a strategic plan, despite the fact that we were told not to do a strategic plan. But have a look at both the community plan and the strategic plan for Ipswich in terms of our backyard.
Any other starters?
Just documents that are coming on, the work that Moreton Bay Regional Council's doing, the work that Townsville Council is doing, the work that Mackay Council are doing, they're really starting to cut the edge and create a plan that responds to SPA and responds to their local communities.
I think there is a real opportunity for local governments to share knowledge now, because I know just from my involvement that lots of local governments are doing some really good work within their strategic frameworks right now, and it would be great to be comparing notes. I know some of you are, but I think there's real opportunities there right now. Kerry?
I'd say Brisbane and... no, I would have actually said Portland and Adelaide, but I'm not quite certain about the ownership of the Adelaide plan. Or Dallas, Texas has a really good strategic plan. And for those of you who know, Dallas has no planning.
And actually the current Brisbane strategic plan still stands up pretty well in my view.
I think one really important thing about strategic plans is they can't solve all the issues. It's important to have a line of sight and to give an idea, but it's also important to have some principles in strategic plans that look over the horizon, because we don't know what might occur. If you look at, there are jobs that exist now that didn't exist when I was going through high school. There are land use patterns that exist, such as call centres, data centres sitting out at Springfield that didn't exist. So the fundamental principles have got to be there. There's also, I always hear, I've done development control, I've done strategic planning. The development control planners say there's not enough detail to give me the absolute answer on this. Your plans are too strategic, and there's criticisms that go up and down. I think if you think that at development control it should all be nicely wrapped up with a bow around it, you're probably in the wrong profession. We went to university, they've trained us really well, we're very smart people, and we should be there to make decisions. So we have to reconcile a lot of things on the ground at the development assessment level. But if we have good principles, we can do that.
Garth?
Cities are going to live, and places are going to live a lot longer than we are. You know, the city that we're sitting in now is 150 odd years old. Consequently, what's that, 30 generations or whatever. There's no reason why Brisbane won't be here in another 150, 200, 500, 1,000 years, if you take Rome's example. The issues that will be addressed in 1,000 years will probably be similar to the issues that we're addressing today, because it's about human conflict, a human consultation. The best that we can do is communicate with each other. And I just strongly recommend that we talk to each other and try to resolve the issues that we can today, because we're not going to solve everything. I mean, that's what death's for.